Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, November 13th. We have a big show for you today. We've got lots of news coming out of the NFL with quarterback situations, whether that be in Indy, New York, Las Vegas, Jacksonville, and more. We'll talk about all of that. We'll also get into some NBA power rankings. It's been 1 week since our last version. We'll get into the updated NBA power rankings, as well as some college football talk. The new college football playoff poll came out last night. We'll talk about Big Ten domination, Boise State out of the top 12, what that means for the rest of the college football world as we look forward to it with just a couple of games left for most teams, as well as if noon kickoffs are good. But we'll get into all of that in just 1 second. Before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, November 13th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to start off our show with the biggest news coming out of the NFL, and something that I've been ragging on the Colts for basically the entire week on. Anthony Richardson is back as the starter just a couple of days after they officially announced that Joe Flacco would be the starter for the third straight game in Indy. They have changed their mind, gone back, and have Anthony Richardson now as the starter. Now, my feelings on this have not been very silent. I have been very loud about the fact that I think this is definitely the right move for this franchise, not just for right now, but for the future as well. Breaking it down a little bit further than we have in the past, we just simply have not seen that same kind of Joe Flacco that was out there in the Jacksonville game that they lost and in relief for the game where Anthony Richardson was hurt. You understand making the move, and at the time, I understood making the move to Joe Flacco from Anthony Richardson, but it comes to a point where after 2 weeks of awful football from Joe Flacco, to a point where it doesn't make any sense. Again, there wasn't any reason why Joe Flacco should still be the starter, even though on Monday they said he was going to be. This is finally the right move made by the Colts. I don't know what kind of conversation it took for it to get through their heads that Anthony Richardson was going to be the starter, but they finally made the right move. Is this going to improve the Colts' chances of winning this week? Probably not, honestly. If I'm being completely honest with you, I don't think this changes the outlook for the Colts all that much right now. What this does do is it allows him to get a body of work that he has been missing. Again, that is the biggest thing that I've been ragging on. You have a project quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, a guy that started less than 15 games in college. He has started only 10 games in the NFL through his first 1.5 seasons now. If you keep keeping him off the field, he's never going to develop. You're never going to see if he's a guy that you can successfully make into a franchise quarterback. This is at least going to help answer their questions. He's going to get to about 16 games, 17 games, so you'll see a full season of work of Anthony Richardson at the end of this year. That is assuming he stays healthy. There are a lot of things that he needs to work on. There's no doubt about it. But when you're characterizing him, he got hurt a couple games into his rookie season, so I'm still looking at this year like it's his rookie year. He got benched. If you compare his numbers to some of the other rookie quarterbacks, he is about on par. He isn't very accurate. That always has been his issues. But what he does deliver that is almost at an almost impossible level is these big chunk plays. He'll go 5 for 15, but he'll also have 200 yards on those 5 completions, right? This is a guy that's going to provide an extra spark to your offense. Sure, he'll make some rough decisions, but maybe some time on the bench helped him out. I'm not sure how much it did. This is a guy that I hope learned his lesson a little bit. I hope learned from whatever mistakes the Colts decided he had made that were benched, that were worthy enough for him to get benched. I think this is definitely the best move, and it's the best move that the Colts have made really all season long, to be completely honest. This is a team in the Colts that came in with kind of dark horse wild card ambitions. They, if you remember, were one game out from the wild card last year, or I guess the playoffs last year, losing to the Houston Texans in the final week of the season, where if they had won that game, they would have gotten into the playoffs. Obviously, when you're that close, you can taste it. You kind of want results. You want improvement. But with a quarterback that's essentially on his rookie season, you have to give him time. And I think the Colts forgot that it was the rookie season. It was the equivalent of a rookie season for Anthony Richardson. And hopefully they've learned their lesson. Hopefully they'll be able to be patient with him, because otherwise they're going to be stuck in a revolving door and he's never going to develop. My big question for the Colts now is, how big of a leash does Anthony Richardson get? Because this is, of course, now his second, and they've said that he's going to be the quarterback for the rest of the season. I'm curious how long that leash actually is. What if he goes up and he stinks it up in the next 3 weeks? Is it going to be back to Joe Flacco, or are they just going to ride it out? I hope they ride this out. I really hope they do. And I hope for Anthony Richardson's sake that he figures it out at the NFL level, because I'm not the only one that can look and see it, the incredible things that he has been able to show us on the football field at an inconsistent amount of time, that he, if he can find a way to put it together, will be a very special player in the NFL. This is not something that he is this close to getting. He's still got a little bit of a wide gap to go, but the only way that he's going to get there, especially with the things that are wrong with him especially, are getting reps in the actual games. And the Colts have finally come around to that, and that's what we've been waiting on. They finally made a good decision. Congratulations to the Colts. There were a bunch of other quarterback news that came out today as well, or earlier this week. Daniel Jones potentially played his last game as a Giant. A starter was named in Las Vegas. Injury news in Jacksonville. We're going to break down all of the other quarterback news coming up in just 1 second, so stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, November 13th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the Colts and how they have officially announced that Anthony Richardson will be the starter for the rest of the season. I'm curious if that's an actual statement, because they've said very similar things about both Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson all season long. Not sure how long his leash is, but I'm glad they finally put the young quarterback back out there. There is a lot of other quarterback news to get through, though. We have news in New York, in Jacksonville, in Vegas about these quarterback situations that haven't really worked out the way that they expected them to. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you were on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, November 13th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to finish up our NFL quarterback news starting in New York. The Giants are on a bye week. They're coming over from an abysmal game, a loss to the Carolina Panthers, in which all of the blame, I won't say all of it, but really you could point the finger at Daniel Jones, and I'm pretty sure that would be the right answer. Obviously, football is a team sport. You're not going to get the answer from just one person, but this is an out year on Daniel Jones. He has not played like he needs to in order to extend his time in New York. The question now is, as opposed to, is he going to stay past this season? The question now is he going to finish the season? And I'm not too certain he will. Now, this is going to come down to a couple of different things. I think number one, what this situation is going to come down to is how confident is Brian Daboll that his job is safe. I hope his job is safe. I think Brian Daboll is one of the better coaches in the NFL, and I think if the Giants decide to fire him or Joe Schoen, either one of them, I think it's a mistake. I wouldn't be shocked if they fired either of them, and I think they're definitely on the hot seat for good reason. Obviously, letting Saquon go and choosing Daniel Jones over him, not a good look just 2 years later, but they built an out year into his contract just in case, right? This is the reason why they front-loaded that contract, allowing them to get out of it now. You also have, outside of that factor, right? The question is, do the Giants think that Daniel Jones is the best option? And honestly, he still might be, even with the way he's playing. I still think Brian Daboll is one of the best coaches in the league, and I think it would be a mistake to fire him. Both him and Joe Schoen, again, like I said, don't deserve to get fired. They've made some really great draft choices this year. That rookie class is really playing great. The defense is playing great, and I think the play calling, honestly, has not been an issue. It's been on Daniel Jones and his inability to push the ball downfield, his inability to take chances, his lack of, just trust in that offense, in his receiver, in himself, really. And it's leading him really out of the building. The backup situation in New York is not very good, to put it bluntly. They have Drew Lock, who they signed from the Seahawks, who came in relief of Geno Smith last year, had a couple of really good moments, but is not the answer. He was drafted in the same year as Daniel Jones, and he was a guy that I think was very similar to Daniel Jones, not generally a good thing to be compared to. You also have Tommy DeVito, who came in and played really good for the Giants last year. I think he is the best quarterback in that quarterback room right now, but that's not saying much, is it? It's Tommy DeVito. You know what you're getting out of Tommy DeVito. He's gonna bring a fun energy to that offense. He's gonna complete the short passes you need him to, but he doesn't have the kind of arm that you need when we're looking at pushing the ball downfield, which has been the biggest issue for the Giants. Seems as if they are going to make the switch. It's going to be to Drew Lock. And when you take a step back from a second and forget that, and forget the performance of Daniel Jones, which has been awful. If you just compare the numbers between Drew Lock and Daniel Jones, you're not going to come to a conclusion. You're not going to come and make a decision and say, hey, Drew Lock, so much better than him. And the Giants also, I don't know if they're going to really be trying to win things. They right now have sole possession of that number 1 overall pick. There are 5 other teams with 2 wins right now. They're heading to a bye week. Things could change, but right now they have the ability to turn that franchise around. This is a team that I think is not going to try to lose. Again, especially with Daboll's job in jeopardy the way it is. This is not a team in the New York Giants that I think is just going to start to tank. But this is certainly a team that I think has the ability to try and tank, and it's not going to be a super obvious thing either. They switch quarterbacks, no one's going to be like, yes, Daniel Jones is gone, now they're going to lose games. People might think they're better. I don't think they'll be any worse or any better without Daniel Jones in that quarterback position, but I do understand why you might want to get him out of there. Sounds like all reports are he's not going to start and Drew Lock is. I just don't think this makes the Giants any better. In fact, I think it makes them even worse. But that's just my opinion. We will see what happens after this bye week. Obviously, we're not going to really know for sure until the bye week is done. But I don't think anything's going to happen. Outside of New York, other major quarterback news, Trevor Lawrence already has been ruled out for the Jaguars. We get another week of Mac Jones. It seems like it's season-ending surgery for Trevor Lawrence. And one of the big things I had taken away from that Jacksonville Jaguars game is the fact that Trevor Lawrence is not the problem. And he never was, right? This is something that I've been kind of been saying for a while. I guess I've been a Trevor Lawrence truther, if that's how you want to put me. Obviously, a massive contract, you don't need a lot of big defenders like that. But Trevor Lawrence, I think, is a guy that gets way too much hate for a situation around him that has just never really been good. The receivers drop a lot of balls, they do, and he makes his fair share of mistakes as well. But you saw what the situation was with Mac Jones, barely able to muster 7 points to an offense that in recent weeks really had started to get its momentum back. You saw its game just 2 weeks ago against the Eagles, where Trevor Lawrence almost led a game-winning drive. The defense stepped up big. They were able to challenge a top 10 team in the NFL in the Philadelphia Eagles, arguably a top 5 team in the NFL in the Philadelphia Eagles. But Mac Jones out there against a good Minnesota Vikings defense was just unable to get anything going. 7 points. That's all they could muster. It's not a good look, especially with the way the defense was playing last week. I'm not sure how this goes the rest of the season. They get the Lions. Trevor Lawrence might be done. They'll be back next season, and the Jaguars should be better for it. And the last one, Antonio Pierce, head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, officially announced today that Gardner Minshew would be starting. This was a legitimate question. Obviously, they don't have Aiden O'Connell. He's going to be out for a couple more weeks due to that broken finger on his throwing hand. But you also have now Desmond Ridder, who came in and took some snaps last week. Desmond Ridder, who, he played a lot of games last year in Atlanta. And this is a guy that we all see is never going to be the answer at quarterback. Maybe he's a guy that can develop, came out of Cincinnati, was the quarterback of that team that made it to the 4-team college football playoff, was undefeated. Not really working in the NFL for Desmond Ridder. Not necessarily his fault, not necessarily all on him. Hasn't always been in the best situations, but in Atlanta, he had his shot. He did okay. He led them to, 7-9 record, which sounds about right for the Arthur Smith-led Atlanta Falcons. It's not enough for Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. Antonio Pierce needs a big turnaround to save his job, and if you're going to take a gamble, you got to go with the gambling man, and that is going to fit the description a little bit more of a Gardner Minshew, who will have his ups and downs. But as we've seen in his past, when he's called upon every once in a while, he'll just turn into a superhero and be able to, take your teams to much better than you expected them to. He did that with the Colts last year. He did that with the Jags when he was with them. He didn't play too much for the Eagles, but when he was with the Eagles, he showed up in relief a couple times, played good football. He's generally played good everywhere he's gone. This is the worst that he's ever played his whole career, but he's a guy that I think definitely adds the most upside for this team. So I think that's the right move. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of these quarterback moves. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NBA. NBA Power Rankings coming up in just 1 second here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over all of the major quarterback news in the NFL. Anthony Richardson, the starter in Indianapolis. Daniel Jones might be out as the starter in New York. Starter in Las Vegas is Gardner Minshew, and Trevor Lawrence might be done for the season. All of that earlier on in the show. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NBA. We have hot off the presses a third week of the NBA, our third week of NBA Power Rankings coming up in just 1 second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, November 13th. But like I was saying, getting into the NBA Power Rankings here, it has been a bit. It's been a wild time in the NBA, honestly. But we are here to do a power rankings for them. Starting off at number 30, we have the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz have just been the worst team in the NBA. They get a couple of big wins against some not very good teams. This is just by far the worst team in the NBA. There's a bunch of really bad teams in the NBA, as there always are, but I think this Utah Jazz team does take the cake. Welcome in, Jay. Glad to have you here. At number 29, we have the Toronto Raptors. They're a team that I think could be really good. You've got a couple of guys that are really stepping up that are in conversation for for most improved player award at the end of the season. Guys like RJ Barrett, I've been super impressed with. They're dealing with their fair share of injuries, so for now they're sitting at the bottom of the league, but this is a team that has some promise, especially if they can get a high draft pick at the end of this year. If they can get a guy like Cooper Flagg, this is a team that they could take a huge jump. Filled with young talent are the Raptors. 28, go to the Portland Trail Blazers. They just had a team meeting, which is never good to have. Just a couple of games into the season, about 10 games in. It's never good to have a meeting already where your coach calls you out like he did, but seems to have worked. The Portland Trail Blazers got the message. They came out with a big win. Again, a very young team. They're not expected to do much this season, but they have some young talent that's starting to develop, and if they can continue to get that going, this is a Blazers team that could be good in a couple of years. I sound like a broken record here, but this is the Washington Wizards. The same things I just said about all those other teams could be said about the Washington Wizards. I love this young talent on the Wizards team. You have three rookies coming out that have absolutely dominated. Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George. All of them have come out and played really, really good. And then, of course, you have a second-year player in Bilal Coulibaly. That is an insane young core that the Washington Wizards are starting to develop. And you can see a little bit of that positive energy that is coming out there that you can see a little bit of future in Washington. They haven't had good basketball here in a very, very long time. The Wizards are at number 27. 26 goes to the Bucks, and this team is the most disappointing team in the NBA by a very, very large margin. The Bucks continue to just fail to win games. They don't have any sort of defense. Damian Lillard is going to be out for a little bit. Giannis continues to play incredible basketball. Damian Lillard, when he's in there, has stepped up, had his fair share of 40, 50-point games out there, but it's clearly not enough. Something is wrong with this Milwaukee Bucks team, and I think they need to fire their coaching staff. Doc Rivers never was the answer. From the second he got there in the middle of last season, this Bucks team took a very sharp downward turn. They bring in Darvin Ham in the offseason. Those two together not the answer. Giannis apparently wants out. They need to move on. They need to find an answer real quick, because if they trade Giannis, this team is probably the worst team in the league, if I'm being completely honest with you. 25 goes to the Sixers. There's been some bright spots on this team. We got the debut of Joel Embiid yesterday. He did not look very good, but we got to see him and Paul George on the court together. Jared McCain playing really good basketball in his last three, hitting at least 4 threes, and all of them over 20 points in them. He's starting to develop nicely, like we saw at Duke when he was on. This is a Philadelphia Sixers team this is a Sixers team that's starting to find its stride, I think, and they're going to be better than this ranking. They're about to make a big jump, I can feel, but they just had to get that playing time together with Joel Embiid. Now that he's made his debut, this team can probably go a very, very long way in the East. At 24, it's the Pistons. I've been so impressed with this Pistons team. Cade Cunningham coming up huge. They are coming off of that big win in Miami, where Eric Spoelstra, one of the best coaches of all time, just made a head-scratching mistake, something that he never does, handed them a win in overtime. But Detroit coming out there playing really good ball against a Heat team that, granted, was without Jimmy Butler, but still, you get Durant back. The way that Cade Cunningham is playing, this is a team that, well, it showed a couple of flashes last season, even amidst its absolutely embarrassing runs. It's starting to show that it can develop into something that might be successful in the city of Detroit. They're here to 24. 23 goes to the Nets. I'm not so optimistic on this Nets team, but they are the most put together bad team, I think. They're a team that, when I take a look at their roster, they're very fun. Obviously, you got Cam Jordan over there. He's just gonna give you buckets. Dennis Schroeder will give you some buckets every once in a while, and Ben Simmons getting some minutes. He's doing Ben Simmons thing. The Brooklyn Nets, not a very notable team, but they're going to find a way to win a couple more games than you expect. The Bulls at 22. Kobe White is awesome, and that's about where the positives end for this team. They have a couple of guys that I think should be on the trade block. Vucevic, one of them. I don't know what they're going to do. The Bulls generally have not been willing to sell, but I think they're starting to learn their lesson. I'm not sure. They've come way back down to earth from where they started earlier on in the season. The Bulls are at 22. 21 goes to the Pelicans, and this is more of a ranking due to their injuries. Obviously, Zion goes down. You lose Jose Alvarado. You still have a lot of really good pieces. I really do think that this is a team that, when healthy, can make some noise in a very competitive West, but they're injured. They can't stay healthy for some reason, and it really sucks, because I just want to see a full season of good Zion basketball, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. 20, it's the Hornets. LaMelo Ball out there playing great basketball. You have a Hornets team that's really made some strides. All of its young talent, I think, has taken a huge step up. I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but for now, when they're healthy, this is a team that is just outside of that play-in rank. That's probably where they're going to end up, in the play-ins, and maybe they can find a way to get into the playoffs, but this is just a fun team to watch. That's why they're a little higher on the rankings than everybody else. 19 goes to the San Antonio Spurs. This is a team that, again, you have a lot of young talent, and I think they're starting to develop, but they're still missing that big piece, right? You have Wemby. He's going to be the guy you're building around. Chris Paul has helped this offense out a lot. Jeremy Sochan has taken a big step up. It hurts that Coach Popovich left due to a stroke. He's supposed to make a full recovery. They should be better soon. Should be. And I think I pulled the trigger a little early on this team. I thought they might find a way to make it to the playoffs in a very crowded, very talented Western Conference. They're not quite there yet, but you can see the vision with this team every time they step on the court. They're just not quite at that kind of consistency that you need out of a Spurs team. The Hawks are at 18. Dyson Daniels is playing really good basketball, along with Jalen Johnson, Trae Young, who missed his last game, but they just came out and they beat the Celtics. This is a Hawks team that can beat anybody on any given night. They just beat the Celtics without Trae Young. Again, that is insane. The Celtics are a very, very talented basketball team, and the Hawks are a dangerous one if they can get everything to click the way that it has. When they're on, they're an unstoppable offensive machine. The defense, I don't quite trust as much, but the Hawks here at 18, I think it's a good spot for them. 17 goes to the Sacramento Kings. They're a team that I'm waiting to get hot. They're a team that, has been struggling a little bit from the three-point line. That was their bread and butter last season. You're kind of seeing a lot of that mid-range, which is what you expected when they bring in DeMar DeRozan. There's some good, there's some bad, not a lot of ugly, but this team is kind of exactly where you expected them to be at the beginning of the season. 16, we have the Miami Heat. How about Tyler Hero? He's really, really stepped up. He's playing all-star caliber basketball. He's keeping this Heat team alive early in the season, something that usually they're not doing. Bam Adebayo's playing good ball as well. You have Jimmy Butler doing Jimmy Butler things. This is a Miami Heat team that's you always need to keep on the radar because the Heat are, again, a very talented basketball team. Some head-scratching moves that were made last night, but that's not something to expect out of this Heat team. They'll turn it around. They'll figure it out by the time the season's over. For now, they're sitting right near the middle at 16. 15 are the Knicks, and this is a Knicks team that I want to put higher. When I take a look at this Knicks team, kind of individually separated from the results, I'm surprised that they don't have a better record. The way that Cat's been playing recently, the way that whole team is able to put up, 10 points, 5 assists, 10 rebounds, basically, every single game per person in that starting lineup is insane. And it's a very, very fun team to watch. I really love watching this Knicks team, but they just seem like they're not finding ways to win games the way that you might expect them to with this roster, the way that everyone is playing, especially with the way that Cat is playing. They're just a very slow offensive team, which is not something that you expect out of a Tibbs unit. The Orlando Magic at 14, they're starting to figure something out. They've won 3 straight games now without Paolo Banchero. They started off as one of the hottest teams in the NBA. They really struggled when Banchero went down, but they're starting to figure it out. Franz Wagner having some really good games. You have a couple of guys stepping up that have needed to. Maybe they're getting some of their basketball groove back. Again, 3 straight games, not just 3 straight wins, but 3 straight blowouts for them. Maybe they can hold on. Maybe they can hold out until Banchero comes back. But that team is much different with and without Paolo in the lineup. 13 goes to the Los Angeles Clippers. This is a team that I want to believe in. Honestly, they keep putting up fights against just about everyone, but they can't close out a lot of these games. James Harden playing some really good basketball. Zubac again playing. I'm really falling in love with the way that he plays basketball as a big man. The Los Angeles Clippers are doing so much better than I expected them to. I thought they would be at the bottom of the league. Instead, they're sitting somewhere in the middle. Still, this is a huge improvement from where I thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season. 12 is the Pacers. We were waiting on the Tyrese Halliburton resurgence. It happened, but it's not just him. You got everybody else in that room really, really stepping up. Siakam stepped up. Everyone in that Pacers locker room has taken a huge step forward, and I think it really shows when they go up against teams like the Knicks and are able to come out with big victories, beat the Celtics earlier on in the season, hand them their first loss. This is a Pacers team that shows why they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They started a little bit slow, but they're starting to find their footing. 11 goes to the Mavs. We saw them play a tight game against the Golden State Warriors last night in Clay's return to Golden State. This team is awesome. I really love this basketball team. Luka continues to do Luka things. Kyrie can just drop 45 on you at any random point, and he has just you know how Kyrie plays. He's got insane handles, and then you add in the shooting of Klay Thompson. When he's on, he adds a whole nother level of spacing to that team that they just didn't have last year. It's a better team than last year, a team that made the finals, and they're going to be very dangerous come playoff time. 10 goes to the Lakers. LeBron James continues to play like a top 10 player 22 years into his career. He's 40 now, and he's still doing that. That is insane to me. I'm left speechless by what he's able to do. This is a Lakers team that, again, is just leaps and bounds better than they were last year. I think a lot of that has to do with the coaching staff. The Lakers kind of started off hotter than they are now, but still, this is a very, very good Lakers squad, just filled with a little bit of older players. So they're not going to be able to, do that every single day in and day out. 9 goes to the Timberwolves, and the biggest thing with them is Anthony Edwards is shooting threes. Like, he just learned how to shoot a three like that, which is incredibly impressive from a guy that already was one of the more skilled athletes in the NBA. You add his spacing to this game, it really is going to help them, and I think that was their biggest issue. He's a guy that puts up a lot of shots, but he wasn't the most efficient player. If he can continue to be as efficient as he has been, this is a team that will be more trouble than it was last year in the playoffs. The Rockets at 8, and they have just been fantastic. Another blowout win last night, granted, against the Wizards, but all of their young talent is really showing, really stepping up. This is a Rockets team that gave the Warriors a run for their money at the playoffs last season down the stretch. They're showing that wasn't a fluke. This is a really good Rockets team, and I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to keep playing at this level all season long. But this is a Rockets team that they're not in that top tier, but they're definitely in that second or third tier of NBA teams where, you look at them and you're a little bit scared. Your boots start to shake just a tiny bit. 7 go to the Nuggets, and this is a team that I think is it's not that good, but you have Jokic. You have the best player in the world, and honestly, it's not even that close. Jokic is by far the best player in the world. He's doing this with more injuries on his team to some of his better players. Russell Westbrook starting to play some solid basketball games. They lose Aaron Gordon. Not good. But the Denver Nuggets, as long as they have Nikola Jokic, will be a top 10 team in basketball. The Grizzlies at 6. I love this Grizzlies team. This is probably my favorite team this year. Zach Edey's addition has gone really well. The depth that they've been able to build, along with Ja's re-emergence, I'll say, as a superstar in the NBA, this team is loaded, it's stacked, and they're going to be a problem come playoff time. The Suns at 5, that Kevin Durant injury really, really sucks because he was playing MVP level basketball, but they'll still be fine without him. You have Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. This is a team that I'm not worried about. They're a top 5 team in the NBA, and I really think there's a pretty stark difference between 5 and 6 right now. 4 goes to the Thunder. This team I'm a little concerned about. Obviously, they are one of the most talented teams. They have all of the assets, but they don't have their big men. Both Chet and both of their big men went down. Chet went down for I think 6 weeks is what it was. This is not a team that has any centers anymore. They're playing, their tallest guy out there is 6'6". They're playing small ball and they're still finding a way to win. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, very good, but when you go up against a team with like a Rudy Gobert or something, they're going to get punished. This is a team that I can't believe how good they still are, despite all the injuries that they're going through. Celtics at 3. This is an unfair team, honestly, and I'm surprised they've even fallen this far to 3. They just took a loss against the Hawks. Jaylen Brown playing really good ball. Obviously, Jason Tatum playing really good ball. Peyton Pritchard, how about him? 6th man of the year up there. He barely played last season. He was their half-court specialist, as they put it, and now he's getting some real minutes and has been a huge problem for other teams, as when he gets hot, he just does not miss. This is there's not much more I can say about that Celtics team. The Golden State Warriors at 2. They are the biggest surprise for me. I was ready to call it quits on the Warriors. I was ready to say that they were done, but they go out there and Steph Curry, whatever he caught in France, whatever he caught in the last couple games of the Olympics, he has brought that back to the States, and he has been a menace. He is unguardable at his age. It is insane what he's doing on the basketball court. Steph Curry single-handedly bringing the Golden State Warriors back to the number 2 spot. And number 1 goes to the Cavs. When you're 12-0, undefeated, chasing records right now, halfway to the biggest win streak to start a season ever, this is a Cavs team that does not look like it's slowing down at all. You have 4 big stars, which is crazy because, outside of Donovan Mitchell last year, the rest of that big four was still there. They just weren't, showing as they weren't competing or playing as good as they are now. The big improvements from Evan Mobley, big improvements from Jarrett Allen, big improvements from Darius Garland have really, really stepped up, and this Cleveland Cavaliers seems untouchable right now. The bench unit playing really good. This is a very, very deep team as well, and that's why they're still undefeated through 12 games. Cleveland Cavaliers are at number 1. But let me know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts on the NBA Power Rankings. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to college football. The college football playoff poll came out last night. We'll talk about all of those 25 teams, my big takeaways from it, and where we stand with just a couple of games to go here in the regular season of college football. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, November 13th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the NBA Power Rankings. Cleveland Cavaliers at the top for the first week. We haven't had a number 1 stay through the first 3 versions of these Power Rankings. Excited to see if they can stay up there for next week. In this segment, we turn our attention to college football. The college football playoff race came out last night. The rankings, the second one by the College Football Playoff Committee. We'll break it down, go through all 25 teams if I think they deserve to be there, and my big takeaways from it. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, November 13th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to get into the college football playoff poll. Again, the second week for the college football playoff poll to come out. Once again, Oregon out the top. Do not have an issue with that. Where I've seen people have their first issue is with Texas at 3. And I don't necessarily have an issue with Texas at 3. I understand their issues with it. They take a look at the teams behind them, Penn State, Indiana, BYU, Tennessee, and you say, why is Texas ahead of them? The reason is Texas passes the eye test better than just about any other team in the country. I love Texas at 3, honestly, and I think there is a clear top 3 in the nation. I think they got the top 3 right. The question that I start to have is with Penn State. Their signature wins are Illinois, Nebraska, right? You have those same signature wins with Indiana, but Indiana is ranked behind them. Indiana undefeated. I know that Penn State has a loss. It is to Ohio State. That's the kind of team that you take a look at and you say, I don't know why they're above Indiana, to be completely honest with you. That's where I have my first issue. I think Indiana should be at 4, BYU at 5. I've also been a lot lower on Penn State than basically everybody else all season long. When we talk about these rankings, again, I understand. I think Penn State should be in. But we talk about these teams, I think Penn State should be a little bit lower. The way that Tennessee is playing, I don't know, maybe they should be above them, maybe not. I think that's about where I draw the line. I'd put Penn State at 6-ish, maybe 7. The other question that people had is with Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame has that brutal loss. They have that brutal loss to Northern Illinois. Not a good look, but ever since then, they've been playing some of the best football in the entire nation. They've got quality wins against Louisville, quality wins against a Navy team that at the time was undefeated. I like Notre Dame at 8. Miami behind them. Sure, I guess. Miami takes a loss to a Georgia Tech team, but but Miami and Georgia both ranked in the top 5 last week. Both take a loss. Georgia now fall into 12th, which has pushed them out of the college football playoffs. And that's another thing that I see people have issues with. Obviously, you see in the top 5, 4 teams from the Big Ten. And we always knew there was going to be 2 conferences that were better. But everyone thought, I thought too, that the SEC was going to be the better of the 2 conferences. Clearly, it's looked like it's been the Big Ten right now. Now, the SEC has kind of cannibalized each other, which has made this chaos situation possible, where we see Georgia on the outside looking in. Not necessarily a bad thing here, but I'm starting to see some SEC truthers out here where they're saying, oh, a 10-2 SEC team is better than an 11-1 This is better than an 11-1 Big Ten team, which I think is a lie, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think both of those conferences have very, very good football at the top, have not so great football at the bottom. And I think if you're going just based on brand value of the SEC, I don't like it. And I think the college playoff committee did a very, very good job of not taking into account these brands. Now, obviously, it's going to be a part of the rankings. You're in college football. These are guys that are college football experts. They know. And they can't possibly watch every minute of every single game, even though they're supposed to be able to do that. This is a team that you take a look at, or this is a ranking that overall the 12 that are in there, I don't really have any issue with. Obviously, the first 2 out. You have Georgia, the first one out, because Boise State gets that 5th conference, that group of 5 spot, and then SMU, which the only way SMU is getting in, unless some more chaos happens and SMU finds a way to win out. Even then, I don't think SMU gets in without a win in the ACC tournament. So I don't mind SMU being the first one out. The question does come when you look at some of these teams at the bottom. I will forever say, or at least for the rest of the season, say I don't think Mizzou deserves to be ranked. Mizzou is a team that they have not looked impressive at all. Sure, they're 10-2. Sure, but you have a couple of other teams that are, have just the same record that I think would beat Mizzou. I think Mizzou loses to the 2 teams behind them. I think they lose to Army. I think they lose to Tulane. I also think that they lose to at least one of the teams that fell out of the top 25 or the college football ranks in Iowa State. Maybe Pittsburgh. I don't think they lose to Pittsburgh, but still, this is a Mizzou team that hasn't really played anybody tight, and I'm a little concerned about that. Louisville at 19, I think, is a little high. I've been very high on this Louisville team. I still think that is a little bit high for them. Still, though, I'd like to see an Arizona State in instead of Mizzou, and I think that's my biggest issue, that Mizzou is in there. LSU takes a huge hit. They're down 7 spots to number 22. South Carolina jumps in at 21. I love that. There's another question here. Head-to-head. How much does head-to-head matter, especially when it's earlier on in the season? They seem to have respected that with Kansas State and Colorado, but when it comes to LSU and South Carolina, they're seemingly throwing that away. I know South Carolina is coming off of a couple of big wins, and LSU is coming off of a brutal loss to Alabama, but LSU still beat South Carolina, and when they're right next to each other, I think you need to respect the head-to-head. So if you're going to have them right next to each other, I think LSU needs to be ahead of South Carolina. Washington State is an interesting case to get in because they're kind of like an independent school. They don't have that auto bid option like you might when you are a Boise State, when you are an Army, when you're a Tulane, teams like that, right? They don't have that kind of group of 5 privilege, as much as you can call it a privilege, I guess. But they're kind of trying to put their resume up against everybody else. Right now, they've only lost 1 game. It was to Boise State, who I think, as the committee says, is the 13th best team in the nation. It's not like they have to put a group of 5 team up there. They just did because Boise State has been a dominant force. They were number 12 last week. I think this is a team that in Washington State deserves a little bit more respect. They don't have that same kind of pedigree. Colorado, I think, deserves a little bit more talk to them as well. But when we take a look at it, I don't have too many problems with this list. I thought the committee did a very good job this week, a much better job than last week overall. And of course, as we get closer, the picture is going to be more and more clear of who's going to get in. But it's going to be very, very messy at the bottom. There's going to be a big name that is this close to making it in that just doesn't because they have some weird tie-breaking loss. It's going to be very tough to squeeze 5 SEC teams in there. It's going to be very tough to squeeze every single one of those big brands. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but it's going to be chaotic, and that's what we love about college football. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the college football playoff poll. I thought, honestly, they did a really good job. But let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll finish up our show talking a little more college football. Some controversy this week having to do with the 12 o'clock time slot. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the college football playoff rankings. The committee came out with their second list of the season. Honestly, I thought they did a very, very good job. In this segment, we finish up our show talking a little bit more college football. Some controversy has broken out surrounding the 12 o'clock hour, especially Ohio State fans, where they've played 6 straight games in the 12 o'clock hour, a couple of big games, none bigger than this one, a top 5 matchup this week between them and Indiana in Bloomington. We'll talk about that, whether or not it's a good thing for the sport. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, November 13th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to get into our last topic of the show. College football has our noon kickoff's the issue. There was a big debate on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, this week surrounding the Ohio State game being pushed to 12 o'clock. Obviously, there's something magical about a primetime kickoff. You see it happen in the biggest environments in sports. You see it happen when we take a look at, Death Valley in LSU. The Penn State games when the whiteouts are at night, stuff like that. When the lights are on, you get these big moments, right? And that's fine. It's all part of the atmosphere and stuff. But I don't understand, to be completely honest with you, this big complaining about the 12 o'clock hour. There's always been games played at 12 o'clock, or at least as long as I can remember, there have been games played at 12 o'clock. And that's just how it works, right? There's only so many prime time slots you can give out. And I know a game like this, a game that's between two of the top 5 teams in the nation, probably deserves to be a prime time game. But I also don't see an issue with it being played at noon. This is a matter of just honestly pride. And honestly, you have Ohio State yell about this all season. They did the same thing with the Penn State game. That one turned out fine. Obviously, it would have been a little more interesting to see it that whiteout at night. It's not a huge deal. I don't understand why everybody's getting so angry about this. These 12 o'clock kickoffs have always happened. I also understand why people are mad at Joel Klatt for his argument saying ratings. This is not what people are mad about for the 12 o'clock kickoff. They're not saying it for TV. They're saying it for fan experience, stuff like that. And for that, I understand. You want that kind of crazy environment that you get at these college at these college sports. That's what makes college sports so special, is the environment that it's able to create, and these huge moments with these huge stadiums, with all of these people that are just going crazy. And that happens in college sports more than just about any other environment, which is why we love college sports here, right? But when we take a look at this issue as a whole, it's just dumb. Who cares if the game's at 12 o'clock? This is going to be a great game either way. And honestly, I think Ohio State fans are just getting their egos a little bit inflated by this. So that's really what it comes down to. I don't think this is a big deal at all. I'm very excited for this weekend. Tomorrow, we're going to break down some of those games. There's some massive games in college football this weekend in the NFL that we'll break down later on in the week. We'll also talk about the Thursday night football tomorrow and all of the biggest news from around the world of sports, rookie report and everything else. That'll be on tomorrow. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Again, we'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. I can't wait to see you all then. You all have a good night. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't